Hello, everyone. I am not Nish Parikh. I know you're looking at me like, no, that's Nish. It's not. Even though I'm wearing my empathy shirt, I'm not Nish. Unfortunately, Nish is not going to be able to join us today. He had some emergency family things he had to attend to. He apologized, but he offered me instead, and I'm hoping I can be a suitable replacement. I can never replace Nish. No one can, but I'm going to do my best. I am Larry Worth. I work with Nish at Rangam, and I'm an executive there. I oversee our source disabled program. Sure, Nish has talked about that once or twice here on this chat. And so I've been in the world of disabilities for over 15 years, working with large corporations to help them implement, scale, and sustain programs for people with disabilities and hiring people with disabilities. But we're not here to hear about me. I'm here just to facilitate and really just fill in for Nish. But I know why everyone's here. Everyone is here to hear from Diane. And so, Diane, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So wonderful to have you here on Chat with Nish.
It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm sure you'll be a more than worthy stand-in, Larry. And I am Diane Lightfoot, so that's that's good.
Yes,
One
you
of
are.
us
At
is
least one
right.
of us
Yeah.
are who we say it is.
One of us are who we
Yes.
say we are.
That's right. Well, wonderful. And I know Nish has many different types of people come on here, but we really are thrilled to have you here today and talk about disabilities, talk about employment for people with disabilities, talk about what you're doing in this space and your organization. So with mine, I want to just give you a little bit of an introduction. I know that can be sometimes weird, but I'm going to do it anyways, right? So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an introduction here. Dan, you are the CEO of Business Disability Forum out of London, and you've been working in this industry for over 17 years. You are, and I can tell I've already had a conversation with you about it. You are passionate about planning and executing employment services for people with disabilities, and absolutely believe that the good work has a role to play in transforming people's lives. So I did a terrible introduction, but I'm going to allow you to talk a little bit about yourself and talk about how you got here. Again, please feel free to that. I doing
Cool.
doing the best I can over here. So
No, that was great, and I have been officially working in the disability space for over 17 years now. But my first real kind of engagement in the disability space was 30 years ago when I was 18. There you go. Now you know how old I am, which is fine. And I'd left school, about to go to university, needed a summer job, and a friend of mine was working on, I guess, a summer play scheme, a summer camp, you probably call it, for children with learning disabilities and autism. And I thought, well, that sounds more interesting than working in a bar. So I went along, different to working in a bar. And I didn't know anything about autism. I didn't know anything about learning disabilities. And I won't bore you with the whole story. It would take us the entire time. But I made a connection with one little 5-year-old boy with autism in particular, and we communicated. And I don't know, that stuck with me. So I went to university. I came out. I went into communications. I worked my way up in the charity sector in the UK. And then 17 years ago, I thought I really want a new job. I was working in comms, and I saw this job working with a learning disability organisation in the UK. And I suddenly thought I can bring together that experience from all those years ago with that little boy, Robert, with my communications role, expertise, profession. So I applied, and I'm happy to say, especially for the sake of this story, that they said yes and that they wanted me. And I ended up staying there for 13 years. And we worked with adults with autism and with learning disabilities and people who in the UK are probably the furthest from the labour market. And I stayed there because I stayed there so long. I acquired different things. You know how when you start a job and it's quite neat and you know all the things you're supposed to do. And the longer you stay, people go, oh, hey, Diane, you're interested in that. Do you want to take that on? So I got given our employment services. And it so struck me that good work, and I stress good work, is perhaps the truest form of inclusion that there is for people with disabilities. So I saw so many people getting a job for the first time in their 20s, 30s, 40s, older than that. And just the transformation in their identity, their self-esteem, their sense of self, their social networks, and of course, actually getting paid for what they do. And that's when I really, really kind of got the bug, I guess, for disability inclusion in employment. And then when I'd been there for nearly 13 years, I saw the job advertised for CEO at Business Disability Forum. And I thought, that is my absolute dream job. And thankfully, I managed to convince the interview panel
they agreed with you,
that it was that it was right, and it still is. I absolutely love what we do, and I am passionate about it. I love working with big businesses. I expect we'll come on to that, and global businesses who can really affect change. It's wonderful also to see those changes in people's lives, and feel like maybe I've made a bit of an impact on that.
That's wonderful. I hear you tell your story, and I'm like, man, that sounds a lot like my story. And I didn't have a connection to disability, and I kind of just got into the disability world by happenstance. And I always tell a story that I went from one job to another, and I spent summer networking, which is basically playing golf. And my wife said, "Get a job," and I did. And so I went and I got a job at a company that worked with people with disabilities in day hab. And kind of like you, like the longer I stayed there, the more involved. Then I got into employment, and that's when I really got hooked, because I worked with people who were doing odds and ends jobs, making several pennies on the dollar for an hour. And I was like, this person can do real work, and they can do tremendous work. And why aren't you going and talking to these corporations? And they're like, oh, you can't talk to the corporations; they won't listen to you. I'm like, if you speak their language, they'll listen to you. And so I'm like. Someone told me, no, you can't do that. I'm like, okay, game on. I'll do that. So and again, like you said, kind of just moved out. And then when I found Rangam, I was like, that's it for me. So, that your story definitely parallels a lot with that. I can relate. So, and we kind of all fell into, companies that really focus on, there's many different sides of disabilities that focused on the corporate side. And, and that's why I love, as I research more about Business Disability Forum and what you're doing, like this is amazing stuff. Like this is amazing work, and the company's been around a while, and now at your helm for the past 4 years. With that history, you have that back in history. But what is the Disability Forum doing now? And maybe you could start with a little bit about what you are, and then kind of expand into what you're doing now.
Okay, thank you. That's fascinating, the parallel stories.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's serendipity. So we are UK based. I'm in London, although I'm at home this evening. And we were founded 30 years ago to bring together like-minded businesses to help influence what became probably the first really meaningful piece of employment legislation in the UK. So back in 1995, the Disability Discrimination Act. And what was really important about organisation was it was making sure that legislation, or trying to make sure, practically worked for business. So what we didn't want there to be was this sort of lovely set of aims and policies that actually weren't practical for employers to implement. So it was really about that shaping policy, but using that with the practical experiences of our members and partners. And 30 years on, we now have 400 members and partners, many of whom are really big household names and brands, but also government departments, universities, health trusts. It's really, really broad. Law enforcement and emergency services, So basically, if you employ people, then we are here to support you. That's the message. And about half of the organisations we work with operate beyond the UK. So whether that is across Europe, whether that's in the States, whether that's a few specific markets, or whether it's truly global, like, say, Unilever and HSBC, who are a couple of our partners. And so 3 years ago now, we set up a global task force to support the D&I leads of those global brands, to help them get a picture of what was happening in the different countries where they operate, and also provide really, really practical support to them on what works, what doesn't, and starting to create resources that are in a really new and for most people, quite an uncharted area. What I should mention as well, that it's one of our task forces, and we have many of them. And what our members tell us that they really like is that it's a safe space. And Shell is also one of our global partners. And when we set up the global task force, one of their key people said, so many things I go to are the horse and pony show, where all the speakers trot out and they say how wonderful they are and everything is perfect. And she said, and that just isn't true. And it's really demotivating and it's really intimidating. So we aim for all our networks to be, as someone else said, a safe space to fail, a safe space to share the challenges as well as what's going well. And we do support people right from the beginning. So we've recently launched a Getting Started toolkit for businesses that are just starting out in this space. So again, really practical stuff. And loads of stuff on neurodiversity. I expect we might come back to that. Mm-hmm. And then we still do the policy piece. So we still take that evidence base of what our members tell us, and we go back to the UK government and say, this is what's working, this is what you need to change. And then we also create research and try and really push the agenda globally as well, and give people practical tools to do that.
That's wonderful. And I spent some time again looking at all the various different members, and I was looking at what you did. I'm like, what a great opportunity to for everybody to learn, right? And again, having a space to look, it isn't always easy. Sometimes you don't knock it out of the park. Sometimes you do fail, and learning, that is just as important as being able to share all the successes, and having conversations with your members, and whether they're the big global companies down to like the local police department, as you said, that's an opportunity to really get some practical information, right? So do some outreach, do some data collection, do some data gathering, and having some information to then report back and talk about where we can improve and do better. And so I know that you've done some of that data gathering and that reporting. What are some of the findings that you have found recently that maybe kind of stuck out to you that maybe you can share with us here?
I will share a couple of things with you. So we do quite a lot of research off our own back, and I will talk about data in a minute. But first off, I will talk about workplace. We call them adjustments. In the US, you call them accommodations, mm-hmm. And they are so kind of critical to disability inclusion in the workplace. I'm sure you see that in the US, absolutely. Larry. And so a couple of years ago, we decided to do a survey, and we had 1,200 participants, and it was called the Great Big Workplace Adjustments Survey. Does what it says on the tin, right? And we found out some really, really key things on people asking for accommodations and how they felt about it. And this was a few years ago, but some of the stats that stick with me was one that 34% of people who responded said that they could benefit from adjustments or accommodations, but they hadn't asked for them because they were so worried about their line manager's reaction and that they would be treated differently as a result. Mm. And it was almost exactly the same figure for people who said they were worried that their co-workers would treat them differently if they had something different, if they worked differently, if they had something that looked special. And that's the one that's always really struck me, that means a third of the workforce are not being as productive as they could be, or as happy as they could be, and are probably covering or working around rather than bringing their whole selves to work. The other one that really stuck with me was we asked how long it would take to get accommodations in place for people. And for 8%, and 8 is a small number, I grant you, 8% of people had waited more than 2 years.
Oh my goodness.
And I always think about, when you start a new job and you feel like a spare part for the first week or so, because people come and meet with you and they tell you what they do. And then you sit at a desk and you've probably got a pile of things to read, or digitally now. And you don't feel like you're actually contributing or doing real work until you've been there a little while and you start, and then you get into it. Imagine if you felt like that for 2 years. Imagine what that must do to your confidence and how your colleagues see you. So things like that I think are really interesting in sparking a conversation around line managers, around line manager confidence, what they need to be able to be empowered to support their colleagues. And if I'm not going on too much,
no, please continue. I'm loving this. This is great.
I really want to share a story with you.
This is great.
And I promise you this is true, and it's from a recruitment consultancy. So we see, I'm sure you do too, that so often people are worried about saying or doing the wrong thing, and so they do nothing.
Right.
And of course, that's much worse than, because at least if you get it wrong, then you have a conversation and you can get it right. And my favorite story, I'm assured it's true, was of a candidate who had been invited to interview, who got in touch with the hiring manager and said they needed an accommodation. And the hiring manager panicked and went to their manager and said, there's this person who needs an accommodation. What do we do? And their manager didn't know what to do. So then they went to HR, and so on and so on and so on. And eventually somebody said, what's the accommodation? And they hadn't asked.
Oh my goodness.
So they went all the way back down the chain, and it sounds like kind of children's story, doesn't it? It sounds like a shaggy dog story. And actually it is a shaggy dog story, because it turned out this was a candidate with a visual impairment who wanted to tell the panel that she was A, bringing her guide dog, and B, could there be a bowl of water and somewhere for the dog to lie down? And that's all it was. But they were so worried at causing offence, it could have been the difference between that person coming to the interview or not. And so I always say, you don't have to be an expert, but if you just say to everyone, what do you need to do your job well or perform at your best if it's an interview? And if someone doesn't act or react in the way that you're expecting, just think, is there something else going on before you react? Just, could you have a conversation about that? So yeah, sorry, I've talked too much.
No, that, like I say, I'm just like, I love the story. Like I think it's, I think it's wonderful, and definitely, like, we can sit here and talk about stats and all that, but when it comes really home of what that really looks like, what that looks like, those type of stories are so beneficial. And so thank you for sharing that. And I agree with you 100%. Sometimes it's just ask the question, ask the question. It's okay. And sometimes you can ask it wrong. It's better that you ask it than, don't ask it at all. And so I agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah. And lots of people worry about getting the language wrong. So I'm based in the UK, and the preferred language is different to the US. And a lot of senior leaders I talk to are so worried about getting it wrong. And I think if you approach it with humility and a genuine desire to get it right and to learn, then that will come across to your audience, and they will help you.
Absolutely. And I say, I don't know everything. I know I've had the fortune to have some experience, but if you really want to know, ask the person. They're going to tell you. Completely. And honestly, for me, I found that when I've done that, my effort has been more appreciated. And instead of just saying, oh no, I know what's right. We don't always know what's right. Asking the person, like you said, with don't even ask them what the accommodation was. And so that's a great lesson learned there. So as you go out and and you've been, engaging with your members, and you're definitely a leader in the space. We're coming out of some very interesting times in our world. And right, I know, and I know that's so cliche. Everyone's saying that, right? It's like, seems like every single conversation I have is like, oh, it's such an interesting time, but it is. And COVID has required us to do many different things differently, and look at things differently, and have different perspectives. And through that, has come some new best practices and some emerging best practices. So from your conversations and the industry, and from your membership, and your partners, what do you see as some of those emerging best practices post COVID, and particularly around the insert, the neurodivergent talent to become more prevalent, and having a voice, and really getting their voice heard. So what do you see, like how is this all coming together, and how is this all happening post COVID, and how can we benefit from that?
Gosh, that's a very good question, and it's a huge question. If I forget to answer bits of it, then prompt me. So I keep talking about post-COVID, and actually it's with COVID, isn't it? Because it's lasting, it's there. And the first thing to say is, before this happened, disabled people were saying that what they wanted was to be able to work from home. Not everybody, but it was the most frequently requested accommodation, certainly in the UK. And lots of the organisations we work with are already very flexible, already very enlightened, and would allow that. But there are still lots who wanted the comfort, if you like, of the boss coming in and seeing everyone kind of lined up outside their office. And we had to change that, didn't we? We all changed that. Big businesses changed that overnight. And there's an important caveat here, of course, that not every industry and not every job can be done from home. So we must remember that. But where they can, then I think the genie is out of the bottle. I hope the genie is out of the bottle. And I really hope that as we build back better, build back fairer, all those things that we are talking about, that we do it mindfully, and that we don't just say, right, well, we can go back to the office now, or wherever it is we work, so we should. Actually thinking about some of the really positive stuff about working differently. We wouldn't have been doing this if it wasn't for this great online platform. But perhaps you wouldn't have approached me in the UK anyway if actually you did all your events in person. It just might not have happened. And there are so many ways that people can engage differently across borders, across boundaries, across time zones, and really just think much more flexibly about how they hire. And I'm really encouraged, because a year or so ago, I was really braced that organisations would say, do you know what? Disability inclusion isn't a priority for us at the moment. There's COVID, there's too much on. And the opposite's happened. They've realised that they can work much more flexibly. They've realised that there is this much broader talent pool that they could tap into. And I really hope we hang on to that. And some of the things that we're starting to talk about are around, I'm sure you are too, around hybrid working, and how you make sure that is best of both and not worst of both. And that you don't create a two-tier workforce where you say, oh, well, it's okay, all the people with disabilities can stay at home, and then we don't have to make the offices accessible, because clearly that is not okay. And making sure that if you say, we want you to be 2 days here and 3 days there, that you say, okay, you have the accommodations in both places. You don't have to choose, or if you have equipment, you don't have to carry it with you. So there's some of these really practical things that I think businesses are starting to grapple with. There's also a thing around sustainability, I think. So if businesses are thinking about downsizing office space and moving, they may well be thinking about doing that with an environmentally friendly perspective. So if you're going to do that, then also make it accessible, also make it inclusive. There is an opportunity to reset, I think. And then the other thing that we're also really, really talking about, and I will come on to your neurodiversity point, is intersectionality. And that is, it's sort of ridiculous that it hasn't always been the conversation, but recognizing that the lived experience of people with disabilities in different countries, of different faiths, of different race and ethnicities, of different sexualities, of different genders, is very, very different. And we need to reflect that in the work that we do. And ultimately, I hope we'll get to a point where we just say, we're all human and we're all different and we all need different things. But we're not there yet. And specifically to neurodiversity, I think it's great that businesses are now recognizing this talent pool. And, you know, why wouldn't you? And it's great to see a lot of programs that actively are trying to recruit people who are neurodivergent. So Microsoft, for example, has done programs to recruit people with autism. I think the really important thing is it becomes business as usual. Right. And that we think about our recruitment practices and we make them accessible. So I often say, you know, traditional panel interviews are brilliant at testing how good someone is at traditional panel interviews. So if you want someone to be, I don't know, a coder, or you want someone to do admin, or you want someone to be a project manager, then actually getting them to show you how they would do it is a much better test, and can also be a much more comfortable and much less anxiety inducing experience, well, for lots of people, but typically people who are neurodiverse. Loads more to say on that, but I know we're short of time. Absolutely. So I will stop.
No, I mean, I would love, love to continue that conversation. I definitely feel the same way, the interviewing in general, like, it's tough. A lot of it is more about how the person likes you than rather what you can do and bring to the company, and becomes a popularity contest instead of an evaluation of your work history. So I could spend a whole nother hour and a half talking with you about that. But we do, Nish runs a tight ship here, so we do need to be mindful. But before we start wrapping up here, all the amazing things that you're doing and your organization is doing, you have an opportunity to highlight and talk about and provide a platform for more people to talk about. And it just so happens that it's pretty good timing for our chat here, because next week you have a big event, right?
We do. It's our annual conference. Next Wednesday, the 30th of June, and it's a day-long event, and it's UK time from 10 a.m., which is a bit early for across the pond. But we would like to offer a free place to anybody listening to this. If you can get in touch and just quote chat with Nish and say that you've heard of it here, we'd love to do that. And it's called Disability: What's New, What's Next? It's sponsored by our partner HSBC, and some of the things we've got are a session on disability inclusion, everything you were afraid to ask. So we've got all these questions of things people are embarrassed to ask about.
That's awesome.
I'm really looking forward to that. We've got a piece on race and mental health. Wow. We've got a piece on perceptions versus reality. Well, two actually. One about how senior leaders think their employees feel, and one how their employees actually feel, and also one about body image and self-image, and actually what that is like as a person with a disability, and then a bit of a look in our crystal ball at what might be next. So yeah, love to have people coming along. It's going to be a good day. That's
wonderful. And I'm glad that even there's times you still have an opportunity to have your conference and share all that, and that sounds wonderful. And I encourage anyone who can, please reach out to this Business Disability Forum and sign up. Absolutely, that'd be wonderful. So for me, again, Diane, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come here today, meet with us, managed through me rather than Nish. So I hope this has been as wonderful as an experience for you as it has for me and our listeners. So thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for your time with us today. And I don't want this to be the end of our collective conversation, and have it be the start of many conversations, not only between us, but all who may have been on listening today. So thank you, Diane. Thank you all who really always show up at 2 p.m. Eastern every day, every Wednesday to hear Nish And I know, you saw me and you probably went, ah. But Nish will be back next week, and he will continue to carry on. But I have had such an honor and privilege to fill in for Nish today and talk with you, Diane. So thank you so very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melinda, for your time with us today. And go forth and do great things. So thank you all. We'll see you all later. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.